Hey, quick question. How do I plot a book?
Write down everything that happens in the story, then in the second draft, make it look like you knew what you were doing all along. Neil Gaiman.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I am Leigh Hull.
And I'm Ley Esses.
I'm the pantser.
And I'm the plotter.
If you don't know what those words mean, don't worry, we'll talk about it.
So there are two different kinds of writers, and as you develop as a writer, you kind of figure out your own routine. And some people just sit down and write,
That would be me.
and some people need to plan stuff out way ahead of time and know where they're going with the story. And that's kind of more my groove.
If you want to be more, refined about how you say this, you can also say outline versus discovery writers.
But on the forums and, if you're talking with other writers, most of them call them plotters and pantsers.
That's more fun anyway.
Haha.
So, what is it like to be a plotter?
Well, one of the things that I do in my own writing style is I'll come up with an interesting idea and then write out a quick short story, and that most of the time gets it out of my system and I don't have to do anything more with it. But if the idea is still lingering in there, then I have to figure out, okay, if there's a full story there, how does it end? Then what has to happen first? And what has to happen before that? Write it all down in sort of a one-page outline. And then every time I sit down to write, I know where I'm going.
That would be nice.
Ha!
As a pantser, I have a general idea about where I want to go, but it's really kind of free flow. I sit down and I start to write and I kind of go, okay, what needs to happen next? And what can I do to get there? And it's a very short-term focus. It's a very close focus to what I'm doing at that moment. And it's difficult at times, but it allows for a lot more freedom in changing your plot and changing your characters and going in a direction that you, maybe as you're starting to write, you kind of figure out, maybe I don't want to do it that way. Maybe I want to do it this way instead. And you have that freedom to just go ahead without having to redo your plot and your outline every single time.
So, if you, as listeners, aren't sure which you are as a plotter or a pantser, a lot of the litmus test is if you have an outline or if you let the characters decide for themselves what's going to happen in the scene. So I like to play God, and so I will throw stuff at the characters and they have to react to it, as compared to the characters sort of, especially during the first half of the story, taking the reins and as an author just sort of narrating what happens in the story.
One of the reasons why I can get away with being a pantser is because of the kind of books that I write. I focus on fantasy with not super intricate magic systems. I do keep a note system for my magic, but with the fantasy, and if I'm not doing too much into super intricate plotting, you can get away with the pantsing. But if you're going to be writing something like a mystery or something where you have that nice twist at the end, plotting is probably the way to go.
Setting it up ahead of time, especially you'll see mystery, a little bit of fantasy if you have a really intricate world, but mostly nonfiction people are plotters. I like to set up the end throughout the story and know when this plot point comes in, so that there's no moment in reading it that you feel like we're not going anywhere with it. And I know as an author, if you're a pantser, which I have been in the past, I'm not as much anymore, it's very easy to fall into here's the backstory of the world and blah, 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 instead of having a trajectory. I swear, I swear I'm good with words.
We swear we're writers. We know
Yep.
English.
So do you know any authors that are also pantsers like yourself?
Actually, no.
Really?
Yeah. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head that is a pantser.
So the author I'm reading a lot of right now is a pantser, and the author you're reading a lot of is a plotter.
A plotter, yes. Well, you guys will learn this very quickly. My favorite author is Brandon Sanderson.
I did not know he was a plotter.
Yes. He kind of has to be, with the intricacies of his magic systems, with his plots, and the fact that he has, for one series, 10 books planned, and he knows kind of what each of those books are going to be. He might be kind of like a pantster, where
Which is, for you listeners out there, that's somewhere in between a plotter and a pantser is a pantster.
yeah, where he has that plot and that idea written down where he's going to go, but he more along with the pantsers can just go with the flow if something happens and he needs to take it in a different direction. One thing that I do have to say and warn anybody who thinks that they might want to be a pantser is writer's block. Writer's block is so hard as a pantser because I can sit down and I look at what's happening and I just kind of go, I have no idea what needs to go next. I have no idea where my characters need to go. And I sit there and I stare at the screen and I can't come up with anything. And then my writing time is over and I don't pick it up for another 3 months because I just can't figure out where I want to go.
So writer's block is when your invisible friends refuse to talk to you.
Yes. That happens to me a lot.
Yeah, one of the most intimidating things for a writer is the blank page. Because there's so many opportunities to tell whatever story you want, but so many opportunities to get it wrong. And I think that's the biggest issue in writer's block is people will shut down because they aren't sure that they're going to do it right.
And why is plotting better in that case?
Well, when I sit down, I'm not looking at a blank page. The first thing I can do is I can look at my outline. I don't even have to reread what I've written. I can just sit down and go, okay, this scene, these are the plot points I need to hit. So I just need to make sure I get from place to place and it feels smooth and it feels natural, but there's still a purpose to my scene. I can, at the end of my writing session, know, okay, the next scene has to have such and such plot points. And then I can be thinking about that while I'm driving or if I'm in the shower. So when I sit down to write, I know exactly where I'm headed with it, and I can make really good use of my writing time.
That's nice. I wish I did that, but I don't.
I would say most of the writers that I talk to, just in forums and whatever, most of them are pantsers.
I don't think I could ever be a plotter because I do like that free form of just being able to sit and work it through. But it has challenged me to figure out how to deal with things like writer's block and how to deal with things like when I am building a magic system, making sure that it's consistent. Because, again, I write fantasy. Fantasy usually involves magic. And if I don't want it to be like a Harry Potter magic system where it says like, yay, magic, jazz hands, then I need to have notes. I need to have progress and a build. That's why I want to do it. But that also means that my editing has to be on point.
And it has to be after.
Yes. When you finish your first draft, you have to go back and you have to fix all of those plot holes. You have to fix the consistencies because you are going to have them as a pantser. You're going to go along in your story and be like, maybe I want it to be this way instead. Maybe I want it to be this way. And you'll change mid-story, which means you need to fix that in post.
One of the major issues I had when learning to be a plotter is, and I thought for a long time I was a pantser, because I would go to outline and I would tell the entire story in the outline. And then like that need, that drive to get this story on paper, to get it out of my system and out into the world was fulfilled when I outlined because I was outlining in a lot of detail. So now I'm doing it almost out of order. So a lot of people like myself will use note cards or something like that where, okay, I want to hit this plot point. I'll put it in this file. Put it in Act 1 at the end of Act 1. I think that's where I'm going to hit it. And then I can move it if I don't hit it when I write there. In the editing process, I'd say a lot of plotters will expound on something. So they'll make a note saying, oh, okay, I want to talk about what this room looks like or whatever. And then keep writing. And then that first editing session, you go back and go, okay, let's expound on this. I'd say as a pantser,
you cut a lot. And I've done that when I've gone back and edited my own work. I find myself shortening things because I go into exposition a lot, which is a common thing for a pantser. And you can just chop that out, get rid of the exposition, get it down to the basics, and it makes it a lot easier. It's a faster process to write as a pantser, as long as you are staying focused and getting over the writer's block. But, whatever it is that you are as a writer, figure out what works for you.
Yes. Every writer's journey is different. And one of my favorite authors says you must write to discover. And often he means discover more about yourself. One of the first things most authors discover is if they're a plotter or a pantser, how they want to emotionally be, what space they want to be in when they're telling their story.
So that about wraps it up for us today. This is Writing Roots, a 10-minute podcast to help you improve your writing skills. I am Leigh Hull.
And I'm Ley Esses, and thanks for listening.
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.